Hello, and welcome to the Storytelling That Sticks for Business and Life podcast. I'm your host and story coach, Doug Stevenson. If you are new to this podcast in the last year or two, I want to suggest something to you. I want to suggest that you go back to the beginning and start listening to the first episodes, because in the first 20 or so episodes, I laid out the foundational principles for my approach to strategic storytelling in business and my story theater method. I originally conceived these episodes as tutorials with specific and detailed techniques and hacks that you can implement to take your storytelling skills from good to great. This isn't a podcast about inspiring you to tell your story. You wouldn't be here if you needed inspiration, because I've listened to many podcasts and read a bunch of books on storytelling in business, and most of them are big on inspiration and examples, but small on technique. I don't think you need to be inspired to tell your stories, do you? I think you need to learn how to tell your stories better. And not just that, how to choose what stories to tell and what stories you shouldn't tell. This podcast is about the craft of storytelling, the science behind the art of storytelling. And in this episode specifically, I want to talk to you about how to fill in the blanks in your story when you're working on your story and you can't remember all the specific details. I mean, you can visualize the event, you can kind of remember it, but you can't remember everything in detail, and you need to in order to make the story work. For instance, exactly where and when something happened, people's names and who said what, all of the tiny little specific details that make your story come alive, because the magic of story is in the details. Now, I remember a student, and this is kind of where this is coming from. I remember a student in one of my workshops asking me if everything in the story that I just told was true. I just told one of my signature stories, my airport story with the look for the limo phrase that pays hook. Now, you can hear that story in episode 2, How to Make Your Story Stick, which is a great episode. And in answer to his question, because I thought it was a good question, I answered that the facts of the story were all true, that I decided to fly to Kansas City from Colorado Springs on the same day as an after-dinner keynote speech, and that my connecting flight got delayed in Chicago, and I almost didn't make it on time to give this speech. That was all true. Those are the facts of the story. That's the bones of the story. But when I decided to work on that story, it was like a year after it happened. And as I was working on it, I had to fill in the blanks in my memory with some plausible details that made the story work. And I explained to him that I'd used what's called creative license, to which he asked, well, doesn't that mean you're lying about those aspects that you filled in? And that led to a great discussion about the difference between telling a story, filling in the blanks, and giving all the details of a story, the difference between that and giving a brief, factual report. When people are listening to a story, they're not questioning if every detail and description is factually correct, because they're too engrossed in experiencing the story. They're listening to a story, not the nightly news. This isn't a report. This is a story. So I need to give you an example of how I used creative license in my airport story. Now, one of the scenes in the story is where I'm in O'Hare Airport. Have you ever been there, O'Hare Airport? Well, one of the scenes in the story is where I'm in O'Hare Airport, having just gotten off my flight from Colorado Springs, and I'm out there looking up at the departure board overhead to see where my next flight was, what gate I need to get to. And as I'm looking up at the departure board, I want you to visualize this. I'm standing there and the departure board is up above, and I'm looking up at the departure board, and I say, gate B18, delayed. Oh no, delayed. Gate B18, delayed. And of course, I react with the frustration. You can hear it in my voice, because any delay would mean disaster. I'm flying in on the same day as a keynote. That was stupid. But where creative license comes in is when I say gate B18. Now, I believe that the magic is in the details. It's the small details that make a story realistic, that make it come alive. So I filled in the blank in my memory by saying gate B18. Now, in reality, I don't remember what gate it was, my connecting flight. I don't remember that. Could have been C12 for all I know. But I chose B18 to be specific. And that's creative license. It's a detail that helps the story. And it's probable it could have been gate B18. So that's an example of where creative license comes in. Creative license is a permission structure that allows you to fill in the blanks in your story when you can't remember exactly what happened, all the specific details. And so you get to make certain creative choices based on what is probable. Because if you don't fill in the blanks, the story won't hold together. It won't work. So what I've learned to do is this. When I sit down to work on a story, I often get stuck trying to remember someone's name. So I just pick a name. No big deal, right? Who cares what someone's name was? Sally or Bernice or whatever. It has no impact on the truth of the story. Or, for instance, the name of the hotel that I was going to be speaking in, or how many people were going to be in the audience. So I pick a number and say there were 300 people in the audience. Or I picked the name of a hotel or what my connecting gate in O'Hare was. None of those things are integral to the truth of the story. What's important to keep in mind is the word probable. When you don't remember the exact details, but you need to make a choice for the story to move forward, just ask yourself, what's probable? What probably happened? What's close enough to the truth that someone listening won't question it because it sounds probable. And because it sounds probable, and for you, as you're making these creative choices, just ask yourself, do the choices you're making to flesh out your story feel authentic to the experience? Do they feel right? Do they fit? Now, I don't know about you, but my memory of things that happened in the past is a mix of specific details and vague memories. And for me, my memories, because I'm very visual, my memories are visual rather than technical. When I'm trying to remember a story, I can see myself in the specific places at specific times. But then the questions fled in. Well, when did that happen? What year was that? What month? And who else was there? Who else were the people in my story? And where did that happen? Who said what? For instance, here's a good example. I'm going to give you a good example. I was just connecting with my friend Tony McGuffin on Facebook the other day. I was wishing him happy birthday. And I remembered how we met. At least this is what I remember. I was driving my Volkswagen bus when I went to make a left turn. And a car came straight at me like he didn't see me. And so I jerked the steering wheel and swerved to get out of the way. But in doing so, I ended up on the curb on top of a fire hydrant. Can you picture this? I drove over a fire hydrant. And so there I was sitting in the driver's seat of my Volkswagen bus while a huge gusher of water was bouncing me up and down because I'd knocked the top off a fire hydrant. And I remember some people were gathering around to watch this crazy scene. And as I got out of my bus, a guy started walking across the street. I can see that he got off his motorcycle and he walked over to me. And with an impish grin on his face, he said, "Man, I saw the whole thing. Do you want me to stick around and be a witness when the cops come?" And that's how I met Tony McGuffin. Now, I'm recounting this story in January 2025. And this event happened, I'm not exactly sure, but it probably happened in 1973 on Rose Avenue in Venice, California. Did you hear the word probably? Because as I sit here recording this, I can see it. I can visualize it like it was yesterday. But the exact details are iffy. Was it 1973 or 1974? Did I get out of the bus or sit there in the driver's seat until the fire department came and shut off the water? Did Tony say those exact words? Sounds probable to me. Come on, you guys. It was over 50 years ago, and I had to use some creative license to fill in what he said. But he said something very close to that. I know that. What's important, though, is that the fact of the story is true. I crashed into a fire hydrant in my Volkswagen bus, and a water gushed up beneath me. Did this happen on Rose Avenue? I don't know, but I think that's true. But you know what? You probably don't care, do you? And it really doesn't matter. Rose Avenue, some other street, doesn't matter. The concept of creative license allows you to fill in the blanks and make your story come alive, because the magic of story is in the details, guys. It's in the visual details, the description of people and environments and emotions. That's what makes the story rich and powerful and compelling. That a group of people were standing around watching me sitting in my bus with a gusher of water coming up underneath me. Was there a group of people? I don't know. I think so. So let's talk about your stories and how you can use creative license to fill in the blanks without compromising your integrity. So, for example, let's just say you're telling a travel story that involves airports and airplanes. You can probably remember when the trip happened and what airline and airport you traveled to and from. Okay, you got that stuff. That's probably easy. But the story comes alive based on the small details surrounding the conflicts and tension and the other people in the story and your interactions and conversations with them. What happened at the airport checking in? Was there anything there? How about going through security, boarding the plane? Where did you sit? Were you in the middle? On the aisle? Window seat? Who sat next to you? What happened? Who said what? What went wrong? Did you arrive on time or was your flight delayed? You may remember some of those details, but not all of them. And so you get to use some creative license to fill in the blanks. Give the story some more tension. Was the flight delayed? By how long? Did you miss your event? Did you lose your luggage? Guys, details, images, scenes, conversations. It's okay to make up some dialogue if you can't remember exactly who said what, as long as it's close to what was said, as long as it's probable. That's how you find your phrase that pays. So think about a story you'd like to tell, but the details are spotty in your memory. No problem. Remember as much as you can, as specifically as you can. And then when you get stuck, when you got a big blank in your memory, use some creative license to fill in the blanks. So here's a question for you. I told you that my friend's name was Tony McGuffin and that I recently wished him happy birthday on Facebook. What if that's not his name? What if his name is Mike? Do you care what his name is, or did you just accept it as fact? The most important part of the story is that I ended up sitting on top of a gusher of water, and a guy came up to me and offered to stick around and be a witness when the cops arrived. That's what's important. Everything else, my friends, is called storytelling. Use creative license. Make your stories come alive. All right, well, that's it for this episode. If you feel that you learned something valuable today, something that you can use that will make your stories stick, stories that make you and your business memorable, marketable, and monetizable, there are 3 things I'd like you to do. First, click on the follow or subscribe button and leave a review wherever you listen. And second, share this podcast with your friends and coworkers, your email list, and on social media. And third, connect with me on LinkedIn. And when you're ready to get serious about taking your stories to the next level, or if you have an important speech, presentation, or TED Talk coming up, or if you want some guidance on how to make the transition to becoming a professional speaker, let's schedule your free 30-minute coaching session where we can get to know each other and see if we're a good fit. And as always, I'd love to hear from you with your questions and comments. Let me know that you're out there listening and learning. You can send an email with your questions, comments, and suggestions to Deborah@DougStevenson.com. That's Deborah, Deborah, @DougStevenson.com. Hey, thanks for listening. Until the next episode, I'm Doug Stevenson.